every county in this country is getting impacted by this open border. I remember right after a year ago in February, I was down in Sarasota, and I think the Biden administration been there 2 weeks, and I was talking to one of the labs, and they already had 2 deaths the day before that they were doing the testing on, and that happened within 2 weeks of just an open border policy. So we've got a variety of posters here. One every 5 minutes, 1 American dies from drug overdose. So, and you see this, just 2 milligrams is a lethal dose. I think this kills, just this much will kill 2,000 people, I think. So, I mean, 288 deaths per day from drug overdose. We've got the number of pills, just a staggering number of pills seized. And the amount of fentanyl that's seized and how many people could kill. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And then you can see the pictures. I mean, you just hope, and I know we're gonna have some stories about this happening to family members, but you look at this and these are wonderful people that we loved, and why, like when Mayorkas comes and testifies at Homeland Security, which he does maybe every 6 months, I just said, I don't get it. You look at the fentanyl deaths, you look at the criminals that are coming, you look at the terrorists that we don't catch. Why don't you guys care? And so you look at this. So why don't we stop there? Let's first go around and then just introduce ourselves, and then we'll each tell our story. So Sheriff, you want to start?
Thank you so much, Senator, for inviting me back and the work that you've done in the state of Florida and across our country in this space. I'm Dennis Lehman. I'm the Sheriff of Seminole County, Florida, which is the Orlando metropolitan area. Also serve as the president of Major County Sheriffs of America, which represents 110 of the largest sheriff's offices in the country, representing 120 million U.S. citizens. And specific to the opioid space, I was the chair of our state attorney general's working group on opioid use disorder, and then the vice chair of the state of Florida task force on opioids. And we've created some pretty interesting strategies that I hope to share today. Thank you.
Brandon.
Senator, thank you. Appreciate being here. I really appreciate your leadership on this issue. I hope that we are able to get more information out so that we can stop all of the deaths that we're experiencing. Amy, if we could do our job better, your son would be alive today, and we wish we could. Whenever we put that uniform on, we go out in hopes that we can protect the American people. We want to stop the deaths that we see going on. Unfortunately, we know that the cartels use our borders, illegal immigration, to drive all of their products, and that's part of the reason why your son isn't here with us today, and we're very, very sorry about that. We feel it every single time that we hear of a death, knowing that we possibly could have stopped that, but we don't have the proper policies in place to do it. So again, Senator, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I'm Paul Steidler with the Lexington Institute. We're a think tank over the river in Arlington, Virginia. Our focus has been on assessing the need for advanced electronic data to track packages that come into the U.S. so fentanyl does not, and the related products do not enter. Things are actually worse than the senator said. It's not only that we have an open border, but we effectively have no rules and regulations on packages coming into the U.S. from Mexico, China, or any other country out there. Now, that step is important. It's not single-handedly going to solve the problem, but it's going to make a difference. Our adversaries, the drug cartels, know that, and so I look forward to discussing that. I also just want to say a special thank you to all the moms and parents who are here. I know that you've been through hell, and it takes a lot of courage for you to be here, and just stick with it. You're doing something that's very good and very important.
Thanks for being here. I can't imagine what you guys go through.
Senator Scott, I'm David Lucky. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm a researcher at the RAND Corporation, and I co-led the team that supported the Commission on Combating Synthetic Opioid Trafficking, and I'm here to present the Commission's recommendations to this panel. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, Senator, and thank you very much for having us here. My name is Lisa McElhaney. We have met numerous times throughout the state of Florida. I am the Chief Operating Officer of the National Association of Drug Diversion Investigators, which is the largest national training organization for pharmaceutical drug diversion with the largest networking platform for law enforcement, healthcare, regulatory individuals involved in the field of pharmaceutical diversion. We are 33, going on 34 years old, and we enjoy bringing as much information and brokering relationships between individuals that are doing exactly what we're doing here today. My prior job was I worked with the Broward County Sheriff's Office for over 25 years. I was a sworn law enforcement officer. My primary job was narcotics and specifically pharmaceutical drug diversion. I was very instrumental in assisting in passing a prescription drug monitoring program for the state of Florida. It took us 10 years, but it was a fight. What we are seeing now and what we are hearing from our counterparts across the nation is because of the lax borders, because of the fentanyl inflow, we have basically become an open-air drug market across our nation. There is very little regulation, there is very little oversight to deal with the illegal substances coming in. And as scary as fentanyl is, right now we are seeing combination mixtures of novel psychoactive substances mixed with fentanyl, which are making it 10 times worse, and that's where we're going. So I applaud what you are doing here today, and we're all in, whatever we can do to help. And I think in answer to your question on why it's not louder, we've become desensitized. We have become desensitized to what is happening in our country. The families, you see individuals on the street stepping over individuals, not offering assistance, not offering help, and I'm talking our communities as a whole. So I think we need to shine the spotlight and we need to make more noise, and that's where we need to start. Thank you very much for having us.
Hi, thank you, Senator, for having me today. My name is Susie Pereira. I am the founder of the Blue Plaid Society. Today is our 1-year anniversary for being stood up. We're from Rockledge, Florida. We're named the Blue Plaid Society because my son always wore blue plaid shirts, so we wear that in his honor. I lost him on November 4th, 2021, to a fentanyl poisoning. And at the time that I lost him, I didn't know anything about fentanyl at all. I learned about this chemical 30 minutes after my son had passed, when the detective showed up and told me that he got a bad batch of something, and I had no idea what she was talking about. So after some time of grieving, I decided to form this nonprofit to provide education and awareness to my community about fentanyl, because at the time, we were the #1 county for fentanyl death in Florida. So since that, it's gone down. We're now #5, so the message is getting out there, and we're happy about that. And we just want to continue our work. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Senator, for convening us. Thank you for speaking at our event this morning and for your leadership in the area of social media and drug trafficking. It is incredibly important. My organization, the Partnership for Safe Medicines, has been in existence since 2003, when our co-founder, one of the pharmacists who founded our organization, was going back and forth across the U.S.-Mexico border, following Americans who were looking for a cheap medication and finding that they were counterfeit. They had no active ingredient. And a sense of perspective is given to me this week when we saw news from the LA Times that they found counterfeit pills that looked like real pain pills in licensed Mexican pharmacies with fentanyl in them. So now no part of it is safe. No part of the supply chain down there is safe. We sit here with moms who have lost children through drug dealers who now, instead of having you visit their pharmacies, are applying it on social media. And I very much appreciate the legislation that your team has put together and the work that you've done to address that problem.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name's Amy Neville, and I am the president of the Alexander Neville Foundation. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna cry. I haven't cried all day. But more importantly, I'm Alexander's mom. Alex lost his life at 14 years old to fentanyl poisoning after connecting with a drug dealer on Snapchat. And Alex died, and of course we were incredibly confused on how did we get here? How did this happen? And we set out to learn everything we could from credible experts on these subject matters. And now I travel the country educating families on social media harms, and specifically Snapchat when it comes to teens and drugs, and of course fentanyl. So our goal is to obviously make sure this doesn't happen to any other family, because a little bit of information would have gone a long way for us. Thank you.
I want to say thank you for having me here and having all of us here. Almost a year ago, I would have never dreamed I'd be sitting here today going through what I'm going through. This was my beautiful girl. She passed away March 17th of last year, so I'm relatively new to all of this. She had mental health issues with depression and anxiety. I think there were many times in her life that the system kind of failed her. She was doing really good when she passed, and I'll go more into her story after a while, but I think, as you said, this is not a red or blue issue. This is not a liberal or conservative issue. This is a national issue. This is an everybody issue. We're losing a whole generation of kids, adults, moms, dads, daughters, sons, siblings, to this. Something's got to give, and that's why I'm here. I'm new to this. I want to get involved as much as I can. I want to get into the schools. I want to get into the communities. We've got to get the word out, and this is where it starts. Thank you.
Sure, if you wanted to start.
Thank you, Senator. And it's the stories like we've heard today that move us as a country. The greatest responsibility of any civilized society is to protect and preserve human life. And what we've shaped this with some non-traditional language in criminal justice is this is not a situation of trying to make bad people good, but rather sick people well. These poisonings that have occurred across our country first, I think, got started with the overprescribing from Big Pharma. We've now heard this with the Sackler family in Purdue, which created this unique, unprecedented dependency addiction. The second phase wave that we experienced is what we call diversion, where medicine cabinets across America were filled with unused medicines that kids were going in and selling them in schools and using them themselves and doing whatever they could possibly do. Then we had phase 3, where people turned to meet that they had become dope sick, and the only thing that was quenching that thirst was street level heroin, which is a very intrusive way to use drugs. But this wasn't a gateway. This wasn't like people were simply following the doctor's orders, and it created phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, and now we find ourselves in phase 4. Which is responsible for more death and destruction in our country than all 3 previous phases combined. We know that fentanyl is 100 times more potent than morphine, 50 times more potent than heroin. 6 out of every 10 pills that are on the street contain a lethal dose of fentanyl. Poisonings are out of control, an open border, and we say it's nonpartisan, but there's no excuse for not one person from the Office of Drug Policy to be sitting at this table having this conversation and discussion. It's actually incredibly embarrassing to not have somebody sitting in that seat. In Seminole County alone, Seminole is known as a very affluent county. We have 325 square miles, a population of about 500,000 people. Again, very affluent, great schools, wonderful quality of life. Last year alone, our public safety professionals deployed 800 doses of naloxone, or in layman's terms, brought people back to life more than 800 times with the use of medicine. And sadly, our deaths hover around 150 poisoning deaths every single year. What we found is we've embraced the gold standard of treatment, which is medical-based treatment therapy combined with cognitive behavioral therapy. And then what we absolutely have to do is we have to ensure that the drug dealer is held accountable to the fullest extent of the law. And unfortunately, in jurisdictions across this country, many of those jurisdictions are treating these as accidental poisonings or in some cases overdoses because they lack knowledge and understanding of the depth of the problem. So you can do nothing more than forensically examine the cell phone of the decedent, and one of the 5 most frequently called numbers will be the drug dealer. We have to go there and we have to put them in jail. And what's interesting is there's now this attraction from this public-private partnership where people want to get involved. We've had major healthcare organizations. It's a topic of everyone's discussion. I think that we know the path towards giving some peace and advocacy to the family members that are here. It gives me chills to look at the photographs that are on the billboard behind us, to know that DEA has a similar billboard. What has happened here is we've humanized this. And families that have been devastated have now found themselves with new advocacy and calling to make sure that nobody else has to suffer the way that they've suffered. And I think that sheriffs from across the country and major county sheriffs understand this, and jails is not the way. You cannot arrest your way out of this problem. And involving all sections of our community to help pave that path forward is going to be important. We've never really had a secure border. We had black tar heroin 40 years ago come across the border but there's never been an open invitation to come. And we're seeing that in non-border communities and everywhere else. So it's a problem, and we stand committed and ready to provide some resources to families.
Thanks, Sheriff. Brendan?
Again, thank you, Senator. When we look at what's currently going on, we have to trace it back, and we have to look at what the cartels are doing, and we have to recognize that the problem begins with the manufacturing of this drug and bringing it into the United States. This is not something that we saw with the meth labs that were prominent here in the United States. This is something that is specifically coming from China into Mexico, and then from Mexico into the United States. And that's happening because the cartels recognize the ebbs and flows of politics here in the United States. They recognize our policies. And because they recognize those policies, they're able to generate a profit off of this. And that profit, unfortunately, is what we see here. That's what that profit brings. And if it wasn't for the policies that we're currently seeing, and you can call it an open border, you can call it a closed border, whatever you want to call it, but the policies are what is allowing this to currently take place. If you look at what the cartels do, the cartels recognize that there is a finite number of Border Patrol agents or OFO officers at the ports of entry. They recognize that all they have to do is flood resources with something other than fentanyl, pull Border Patrol agents out of the field, which then creates artificial gaps in coverage. When they create that artificial gap in coverage, that's when they cross their higher value products, such as fentanyl or other dangerous drugs. We see that on a daily basis. The politics, where that comes into it, is what really scares me. When I'm testifying at a hearing and I hear some politicians say, well, it's our fault because the demand is driving this. The demand, that's not demand. A 14-year-old, a 13-year-old, that's not demand. And that's what we hear from certain politicians. And so if we're not willing to look at and say, what is the number one cause? What's the driver behind all of this? And the driver is it's profit. It's profit from the cartels. But the policies are what allows the cartels to operate. If we had the proper policies, we would be able to go after the cartels. We would be able to shut down the border. It's been done before. We can do it again. We just have to have the proper policy. And what's funny about that is policy doesn't cost the American taxpayer anything. We don't need more resources. We don't need more drones. We need proper policy. After we have proper policy, then we can address what are the resources. But until we have that proper policy, all we're doing is throwing money in a black hole. Thank you, Senator.
So I would just add to the proper policy aspect to it. The heart of the October 2018 opioid legislation that President Trump signed, which passed with near unanimous support in both the House and the Senate, was a provision that packages coming into the United States through the postal system would be tracked. So there was also, at the time, no doubt about the fact that that was the primary way in which fentanyl was entering the country. Since then, you've had just an extraordinary amount of failures by omission to do the blocking and tackling issues to make sure that those substances could be identified and seized. Now, part of the problem with that, or one issue related to that, is there was an agreement with the Chinese government that they would crack down on exports of this. But a year and a half after that, National Public Radio, not exactly a conservative news source out there, did a hugely in-depth story about how there were still large amounts of fentanyl that were going out from China to the U.S. There's certainly a great deal that's going from Mexico. But CBP failed to put into effect even basic regulations on this. They were due to put regulations into effect in October of 2019. They didn't come up with anything until some interim regulations in March of 2015. The Washington Post and other stories, 60 Minutes did stories about how there was this continuing problem with opioids coming from China into the U.S. We simply don't know how much of the opioid shipments are coming from places like China or India or by mail from Mexico. Last fall, I arbitrarily had a friend send me 5 packages from Mexico. Not one of them had any tracking information that was on it. Why we can't get an agreement with Mexico to have some tracking legislation on that is beyond comprehension. 3 weeks after we passed our legislation, the Communist Party in China mandated that every package going into China would have AED on it. And you can be quite sure that if a package is going to get delivered there, it's going to have that tracking information. So the cartels, as these gentlemen to my left can tell you much, much better than I do, are going to go to where the defense is not. We don't have any defense in our postal system for keeping shipments out of the country. And there's discussion about the fact that the STOP Act inhibited people and shifted things to Mexico, and it's not as necessary as it once was. But we actually have no idea about that. We don't have people on the ground in China who are checking this out. We don't have people in Mexico who can pinpoint this and stop this. And if we're going to approach this as a full-fledged national crisis, which it is with 107,000 people a year dying and 3/4 of those from fentanyl, you can certainly put into a place tracking information on packages. And by the way, this is not some newfangled technology. This was mandated after 9/11. The technology has been around since then. Private companies, UPS, FedEx, and DHL, they've been using it since then. Also the Government Accountability Office last May reported that mail is one of the #1 ways in which illegal drugs enter the U.S., and they are 5 times more likely to come in by the Postal Service than by all private carriers. And by the way, the Postal Service doesn't have a lot of business in terms of international shipments. So this is one of those issues that should be a no-brainer. I'm sure there's a lot of other efforts that could be done. It's kind of boring, frankly, to talk about electronic tracking and database stuff and things like that. But that's it's a tool that we can apply, and we simply have failed to do it. and it's not that expensive, and it's costing lives. It's not a silver bullet, I readily acknowledge that, but it's one of the important steps we can take, and if nothing else, it'll show our adversaries that we're serious about this, and we're going to do whatever we can to go after them.
Thanks, Paul. Sandy?
Hi. Paul, you mentioned the 60 Minutes show. The parents responsible for that 60 Minutes show are in the room today. And I want to thank the Families Against Fentanyl for being here. Jim Rao is his boy's father, and his mother's here. Thank you. So you talk about your trackers, your little, I'm close friends with the HIDA director in Alaska, and they track their toys. I call them toys out there at the airport. So I can tell you what's happened in a small community in Alaska. Kodiak had a mass poisoning event of a package that was not interdicted. Senator Sullivan from Alaska, through the postal inspector, was able to provide that community with a postal inspector. They had one of their little toys out there. They interdicted 15,000 fentanyl pills before it hit the streets in Kodiak. They saved lives. They saved lives. And that's a concrete example that I know happened in my community. So I've mentioned Senator Murkowski, Senator Sullivan, and Senator Feinstein introduced in the last legislative session in 117, Bruce's Law, named after my son. It's almost ready to be reintroduced, senators. So I'll do a little bit of please co-sponsor Bruce's Law. It is completely bipartisan.
What's it do?
It's completely bipartisan. It's a red, white, and blue education, prevention, SAMHSA grants, coalitions, CADCA coalitions. So there's, we've said numbers of times already today, it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. It's the first legislation that will have the word fentanyl in it. So I'm proud of Senator Murkowski, Senator Sullivan, Senator Feinstein, to get it hotlined, get it through the Senate, get it through the House, and make those funds available to everyone here. That I have AK Fentanyl Response Project. So when those funds are available, we can work harder. We're working hard now, but we do need to buy airline tickets and hotel rooms and meals so that the mothers in this country and the fathers in this country that are working our butts off. I've quit my job to do this. We will continue to do that work, but we need help. We're asking for your help. We are asking for the government's help. This is not our job. We should be home grieving our children, but we're not. We're sitting here today. We're not sitting at home grieving. We're trying to keep people alive. Please help us. Thank you.
Thanks.
Illegally manufactured fentanyl is killing our future. It's an indiscriminate poison, and no one is immune from its consequences. As we all know and have heard here today, more Americans aged 18 to 49 are dying from fentanyl overdose than anything else, including, for example, gun violence, car crashes, or disease. And it's not just about this horrible story of these deaths. Opioid use disorder creates harms for people who use drugs, for their families, and their communities, such as high economic impacts. Senator Scott, thank you so much for inviting me to take part in this panel regarding a topic of such significance to our country. In an increasing number of places in the US and Canada, fentanyl is displacing heroin. This type of displacement hasn't happened for 100 years, when heroin displaced morphine early last century. This has had and will likely continue to have deadly consequences. Fentanyl is easier and less expensive to produce than heroin, and RAND research also suggests that fentanyl prices are now declining. And it's also significantly more potent than heroin, as we've heard here today. Fentanyl and other illegally manufactured synthetic opioids are now primarily entering the United States from Mexico via the standard illegal drug supply routes. It appears that the majority of illegal fentanyl crosses the U.S.-Mexico border at San Diego, which is where I'm from. And precursor chemicals continue to be a problem, mostly being shipped from China to the two largest Mexican cartels, Sinaloa and New Generation. Over 100,000 Americans are now dying from fentanyl overdose every year. The majority, approximately 70,000, involve fentanyl. There are several reasons for this. In some cases, people are unknowingly using heroin that's mixed with fentanyl. And there are some communities where people who use illegal opioids are now seeking out fentanyl. There are also issues with counterfeit pills containing fentanyl and an increasing number of reports that fentanyl is being mixed with stimulants such as cocaine and methamphetamine. To attempt to counter this, the United States must take a comprehensive approach, including efforts to reduce supply, demand, and harm from this poison. I co-led a team of 80 researchers, analysts, and support staff from across a broad array of disciplines, not just drug policy. We had medical doctors, attorneys, chemists, national, homeland security, and law enforcement experts on the team, and from many other fields that supported the Commission on Combating Synthetic Opioid Trafficking. RAND supported this work out of its Homeland Security Operational Analysis Center, which is one of RAND's 4 federally funded research and development centers. The Commission on Combating Synthetic Opioid Trafficking was a bipartisan, bicameral, joint legislative executive branch commission whose charter was to build consensus, developing a strategy to reduce the production and distribution of illegal synthetic opioids, primarily fentanyl, in order to reduce the number of overdose deaths. The 2 commission co-chairs were Senator Tom Cotton, a Republican from Arkansas, and Representative David Trone, a Democrat from Maryland, to show the bicameral and bipartisan nature of this issue. The commission released its final report about a year ago after conducting numerous interviews and briefings. We traveled to sites in the United States and Mexico. We analyzed primary and secondary data on drug use and supply. And the commission's report laid out new challenges created by fentanyl, as well as new approaches to counter these growing challenges. The commission produced 78 action items, many of them directed at the Congress, across 5 pillars for how to address this crisis from both sides of the supply and demand equation. And these 5 pillars are policy coordination and implementation, supply reduction, demand reduction and public health, international cooperation, and research and monitoring. Some overwhelming sentiments encountered by the Commission were that the United States cannot interdict its way out of this problem, we cannot arrest our way out of this problem, and we cannot treat our way out of it. More Americans have died from drug overdoses in the last couple of decades than in all United States combat operations from the Revolutionary War through Desert Storm. Let me repeat that. More Americans have died in about 2 decades from drug overdose than all combat operations the United States has ever taken part in. There's no silver bullet that will make this problem go away. In fact, I would suggest multiple efforts are needed across many areas if there's to be a reduction in the number of overdose deaths. It will take a comprehensive, whole-of-nation response. Action is needed on the supply and demand sides of this problem. You can't look at one and not the other. We also can't ignore harm reduction. But we need to be thoughtful about resource allocation, making sure we are investing in approaches that are the most cost-effective and have the greatest return on investment. I encourage everyone to read the report, and I'm happy to dive further into the report's recommendations later in the discussion. Thank you once again, sir, for the opportunity to discuss this issue of such grave national significance, and I look forward to any questions anyone might have.
Thank you. Lisa?
Thank you again for having us here, and I second your statements. Clearly, you stole some of my thunder, but I won't go there. This has to be a multifaceted approach. We cannot just focus on border controls, which we know we need to have. We can't just focus on education, which we know we are lacking in. It has to be synonymous with each other to address this and to alleviate this monumental problem that we have. And I don't want to get lost in the term of just fentanyl. because it's not just fentanyl. And I bring to your attention, Natty puts out on a regular basis our most abused pharmaceutical drugs brochures. And we use this as an education and training component for law enforcement. The pills that are on this chart are directed from our law enforcement component, our members, on what they are seeing on the streets. Normally, the pictures that you see here are legally manufactured drugs, FDA-approved medicines, and that's what we put out. Well, we did something a little bit different this year. We reached out to state and federal crime labs and asked them, what logos are you seeing on counterfeit medications that contain fentanyl or other illicit substances? And right now we have 31 that are red starred. And there's a black box warning on the back of the brochure that explains that although it may look like a Percocet or a Xanax, it may not be, no matter where you're getting it from. This is education that is instrumental not just to law enforcement, to communities and to families. Every news article you see out there will say the word fentanyl, or will refer to a logo M30 or blue tablets that they're seeing. There are so many other variations of counterfeits that are out there. It is unbelievable, but that information is not spread and is not given to the boots on the ground first responders that need to know about this. It's not passed on. We do the best we can, but we need better education. Another component that I need to bring in is social media. And I'm talking about the internet, I'm talking about our social media sites. There is absolutely no resistance and no regulation as far as drug talk, drug sales, activities going on across the board. And we're fighting an uphill battle at this point in time. When we dealt with the pill mill problem and we dealt with everything that was going on, they were legal drugs, they were legal doctors, or there were licenses involved in individuals that were putting those out on the street. There was regulation, oversight, there was resistance, and we were able to deal, and that took us several decades to get control of that and move forward. Did we solve it completely? No. We kind of pushed it into another area. But in this age of technology, we have very little resistance on what is put out there. We have very little regulation and even less control over what is being taught to our children and what is being put out into the communities. And the worst part is the drug dealers, the manufacturers are only a portion of the predators that are out there. We have the sexual predators, there's human trafficking, there is everything that is very prolific across these sites. And unless we address this major tool being utilized by the drug cartels and our dealers, and that is influencing the knowledge of our kids, we're losing the battle. I mean, this is something that we have to put some teeth into. And I don't have all the answers, and I don't think there is any one answer to doing this. But that is a focus that we have to build our resistance, put more regulations in, and more controls on the stops on the tools that are being utilized by these individuals that are pushing all these substances. And thank you very much.
Thanks. Susie?
Okay, so I don't have all that. I'm just a mom. But I want to go back on what Sandy said. She quit her job to do this and to do this full time. I didn't quit my job. I have to keep a roof over my head. I'm the person responsible for that roof. And after my son died, I'm the only person in that roof. So I work full-time, 40 hours, and then I do 25, 30 hours on Blue Plaid. And I agree with what is being said here. It has to be a multifaceted approach. The guys out there, the law enforcement out there, the Border Patrol out there, they're catching the bad guys. They're doing their job. You guys, you're doing your job. Legislatures, you're passing bills. You're making it harder, and more stringent for people getting caught dealing this poison to go to jail. But the education, it's lacking. All you've got is us moms and, popping up here and there, a few in each state, and we don't have the resources at our disposal like the CDC had when COVID hit. 1 month into it, we were all washing our hands, we were all social distancing, we were all wearing masks. We got the numbers down. There's not that response here. And it's because a lot of people, and I hear this all the time, well, that's because the junkies deserve to die. They should have known better. They should have known not to take that shot, snort that line, take that pill. My kids would never do that. My kids would never do that. This is different. We have been trying, I know I've been trying for the last year to put it across to people. Yeah, you've got a great kid, but do you know how many straight A kids I know that have died of fentanyl poisoning because they made that one mistake? So it's just a multitude of nonprofits like mine and like Amy's and like Andrea's. We're doing the best we can, but we need more help on a national level. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Without being that uncle that tells a long story, I'm going to tell a story. Beginning of last year, Amy and her co-chair, Steve, who are both advocate parents, invited me to be on an expert commission to study solutions that would be used to eliminate drug trafficking from social media. It's a big problem. It was instrumental in Alexander's death. And we talked to experts who had worked on issues of sexual exploitation and sexually explicit material and said, how did you solve it? Because while it's still a problem, it doesn't seem to be as out of a control problem as fake pills being sold on social media. And at the beginning of that process, my research team at the Partnership for Safe Medicines came to me and said, we found this Facebook page, and they are openly selling drugs. And they are doing two things that really make us angry. The first of which is they're selling and shipping through postal mail internally, registered mail. So they go to the kiosk at the post office and they get the proof of mailing and they post it on the Facebook page as proof to the buyer that they've actually shipped their pills, which is particularly ballsy. The second thing they're doing is that they give a discount to their customers if they upload a video unboxing that package, that postal service package envelope with the pills inside it and showing how they hid them. So in one case, there's a video of a person opening up the package. Inside the package is an envelope. Inside the envelope is a deck of cards. And then you look and half the cards have been removed and there's a bag of fake Percocets in there. And that is their proof that they're a good seller, right? That they actually deliver what you pay them for. And so my staff reported it. Everyone on my team was so deeply offended, we reported it to Facebook and said, you cannot possibly leave this up. This is unreasonable. And they came back and said, that doesn't violate community terms of service. And of course that made us...
To kick them off?
To remove them. So they left them up. And they said, do you want to escalate this to a human? And we said, yes, we would like to escalate this to a human. And then a couple of weeks went by, and they said, it's been reviewed by a human, and it still, in our mind, doesn't violate community terms of service. And at that point, I said, don't spend any more time on it. Unbeknownst to me, some of my staff continued to take every individual video and picture and individually report them as violating community terms of service. Nothing ever came down. And then the page went quiet for a while, and then something was posted to it that says, visit our new Facebook page. And they just made up a new Facebook page, and they changed the S in their name to a Z, and they were back to the same old thing, posting registered mail receipts to show you that you can track your pills on their way to you, and then having customers post thank you videos showing how well their pills arrived in good condition and that they actually delivered. I agree with everything that's been said about our pharmaceutical border security, about the problems of medicine with fentanyl coming in from both Mexico and Canada, because Canada has a fake pill fentanyl problem as well. But we have to also apply a similar amount of attention to social media platforms that are operating with impunity, absolute impunity. Thank you.
There's been a lot said already. But as far as our foundation is concerned, we're really focused on the 12 to 17-year-old age group. That is where my bias lies. And part of what we do are quarterly listening sessions with teens. And of course, I travel. This is also my full-time job, for lack of a better term, right? People assume you get paid for a job, but we do this out of the love of our child. You know, that's what drives us. And we again, don't want this to happen to anybody else. But as I talk to these youth, you know, they're up against a lot. We are so guilty of judging their experience based on our own, and our kids are having a lived experience that we cannot relate to at this point. They are the experiment. These social media companies are experimenting on our kids as well as us, but you know, we're adults, so hopefully we can identify things. Our frontal lobes are fully developed, so our impulse control should hopefully be in check. And I hear from these kids all the time that the drug dealer, oh, they're my friend, they would never do that to me. They're being groomed into this. It's not, you know, this kid goes out and looks for drugs on Snapchat. It's a relationship building process, and next thing you know, 8 to 10 interactions later, these kids are doing things that we wouldn't think our kids would do. And then the other side of that is these drug dealers control this narrative with these kids. Somebody dies, and they get out there and they put the blame on the victim. And people buy into that. You know, they were drinking and taking this drug, or my stuff didn't kill them, it's somebody else's. You know, I can connect at least 4 deaths to the dealer that killed Alexander. And that's outrageous that this person still gets to, you know, be in the streets and do their thing, but something he did was get out there and talk about each death and how it wasn't his fault, it was the user's fault. And that, you know, is part of that stigma that we're up against. No. It is now a cold case. All 4 cases are now a cold case, but you know, that's a story for another day. So here we are with a society that our conditioning is to blame the user, right? To blame the kid, the 14-year-old kid, for putting that pill in their mouth in the first place. I get that all the time from people. And, you know, that doesn't happen that we don't have a drug problem in our family. So, you know, we're not going to die from an overdose. So a lot of what we do is, and I think all of us moms here really work on this, and Dad, Jim, I know you're back. Oh, Jim just left. But there's a lot of dads involved too, but is changing the language around these deaths. Because when we say overdose, oh, we don't have a drug problem in my family, that can't happen in my family. But when you say poisoning, it's something clicks. You know, when you're pregnant with your child, you're moving the poisons up into the cabinets. You're putting child safety locks. There's poison control. We are conditioned to understand poisoning, where overdose is a term we can't relate to. So that, I think, is the beginning of really changing stigma around this and educating our communities that this is different. This is not the old war on drugs. We are in a totally different phase, and we need to treat it differently.
Thanks, Amy.
A lot of stuff has been said. We've heard a little bit on legislation and law enforcement from the border and for the communities. We've heard some on the statistics, the shipping, education, and communities. My daughter had mental health issues. She suffered from anxiety. She suffered from depression. She suffered from substance abuse disorders from her mental problems. When she passed away, she had just finished an 18-month, court-ordered granted, 18-month program that changed her life in St. Pete. When she finished the program, because she knew she wasn't ready to be on her own, she made the decision, which I was so proud of her for, to go into transitional housing in a women's-only residence. She got a job. She started saving money. She was doing everything she was supposed to do. She was going to her meetings. She was seeing her mental health providers. She was seeing her case manager. She was doing everything she was supposed to do. She was taking her medications like she was supposed to do. She had people watching her. She had accountability. A year ago, this past October, she was told, "You're ready to be on your own. Your bank account is stable. Your job has been stable. You're taking your medications like you're supposed to be taking. You're ready to be on your own. We're going to help you get an apartment. We're going to pay your deposits. We're going to pay your first couple months' rent. It's time for you to be on your own. I'm scared. I'm not ready, was her response to her caseworker. Mackenzie, the state only gives us so much money. It's time for you to go. Right before Thanksgiving, she moved into her own apartment. Yes, they paid her deposits. Yes, they paid her rent for the first couple of months. Yes, she had a nice savings account, and she was doing well in her job. However, the accountability stopped. Yes, she had the choice to check in. Yes, she had the choice to go see people. She was continuing with her mental health physician. However, when the depression and the anxiety and all that other stuff started creeping back in, the self-doubt, all her mental health physician did was change her meds. He did not say, well, let's try this medication, but let's also get you in to see somebody to see what's going on. Then she had her wisdom teeth out, which I wish she would have never done. Because then the pain, the headaches, along with the anxiety, along with the depression and the darkness she suffered before was coming back.
What'd they give her? Did they give her pain medicine?
She told me it was tramadol, but I think she probably went ahead and got pain medication, but she told me she didn't. So, with that being said, the only thing that has not been mentioned is the mental health part of this whole picture. Because yes, it is a multifaceted, multi-pronged approach that we need. I'm an occupational therapist assistant, and in my job, which I have to have full-time, I can't do this full-time, I would love to, is we call it multidisciplinary. We need the law enforcement. We need the legislation. We need the education. But we also need the mental health in the community. We need the stigmatism to go away. And it's not going to go away, but we need to educate on that. Because I know when the police were called to her apartment, which her boyfriend found her, they looked at her as just another addict that had relapsed. When I got her autopsy report back, she had her prescription medication was in her system, but also 57 milligrams of fentanyl. It only takes 2 to kill. Methamphetamine and hydrocodone. So the pill she took was hydrocodone with the methamphetamine in it and the fentanyl. I'm sorry, Mrs. Daloff, we can't do anything because we can't be guaranteed of what killed your daughter. So nothing was done on the law enforcement side. I know it was the fentanyl. I'm sorry, it was the fentanyl. That being said, my daughter had a future. She was looking forward to a future. She was in the first healthy relationship she'd ever been in. And she was going to go back to school to finish her degree, to get her master's in psychology. And then this. I can't hug my daughter anymore. I can hug her picture. I can hug my charms that have her with me. I can talk to her in the air. I can write her letters. But I don't have her anymore because of the fentanyl, because of the mental health. We've got to add that with it. And it has to be a mandatory follow-up. It has to be. Because once you have somebody that has somebody checking in on them, that accountability for 18 months plus more time, and then you just let them go, and they start having problems, and there's no accountability. The first thing they're going to do, most of the time, is go back to what they know will help them through the dark period.
Yeah, because they're going to self-medicate.
They're going to try to self-medicate because the medication alone that they're being given isn't helping because they need that other component. They need that counseling component. Without all of that, the community action, the legislation, the law enforcement, the border control, none of that's going to matter. On the border side of it, yeah, we have security at the legal access points, but we don't have any security between point A and point B. In Ocala alone, they've gotten pill presses, they've gotten fentanyl, they've gotten everything, just in Ocala alone last year. Enough to kill so many people. My daughter died in St. Pete. She grew up in Bradenton. I just want to do what's right by her. I don't want more parents to be sitting here next year. I don't want these kids, some of these kids, they have so much pressure on them. Your kids, they've got social media, they have bullying, they have pressure from classes because they're given so much. Academics, worrying about scholarships for college. Am I going to get in the right college? I'm doing sports. I've got all these things going on. So they're going to their friends asking, I need something to help me sleep. They're going to their friends saying, I need something to help me get through these exams. Because if I don't do good on these exams, I'm done for. So you got to take away that pressure. You've got to get into the schools as well and get these kids the help they need at that entry point right there. Because none of this is going to work if you don't put it all together like a puzzle. That's all I have.
Sure, if you want to talk about, what you need to be able to do your job that you don't have right now.
Well, thank you, Senator, and thank you all, because it's conversations like this that help move us and advocate for certain things. One of the things that I think that we can do immediately on a federal level is to ensure that OSHA standards include keeping naloxone in every single business that operates in this country. There should be no excuse with the epidemic and the crisis that we see that every business that is required to have certain health and safety standards within their business does not have naloxone as a part of that. I'm also a chair of David and Jackie Siegel's foundation, Victoria's Voice, and David and Jackie lost their daughter Victoria, and we've had some national advocacy and had some success with raising some money and awareness, and many of the families here that have lost their loved ones probably know about that. To Rebecca's follow-up point, we know that you cannot be in one crisis without having the co-occurring, co-present mental health condition that goes along with it. And I wish that we could go back to the Reagan era and just simply say, just say no, right? Just say no works absolutely fine if you've never started. But if you've started, it is a complete different narrative. And I think that we're working to change. But it's important to mention here, Senator, that the unintended consequences of COVID, sheltering in place, wearing a mask, not going to school, not being around other people socially, has had a negative cognitive effect on our society to the point where 25% of our children have seriously contemplated suicide in the last 2 years. And many people that were in good, solid recovery programs simply weren't going. You have to be around another human being to recognize, are you doing well? And it's easy to say over a phone, or it's easy to say that over a Zoom call, but many people who were in recovery only turned back to their substance of choice at greater numbers than ever before because of COVID. And that is a critical point of what we're doing. We also need a platform to tell states that have laws that they need to clean up the language within those state laws to make sure that these cases are prosecuted. Many states have language that deal with proximate cause of death when it comes to toxicology reports and what they're able to prosecute. In the state of Florida, we're working to change this legislative session proximate cause of death to substantial factor. The difference is they may have a higher potency of a different substance in their toxicology report, but still a lethal dose of the deadly substance of fentanyl, and that needs to be cleaned up. Minimum mandatories for people dealing in fentanyl. Last year with HB 95 in the state of Florida, we were able to get that to the finish line where we increased the minimum mandatories of sentencing, while in addition to that, increasing the penalties for drug dealers selling in proximity to an area where somebody is trying to get clean. Many states have this increased penalty where they're selling in proximity to a school, church, playground. But we've also added in there any type of recovery facility where a drug dealer may be simply standing across the street trying to attract themselves to a dependent audience. When we created that bill and got it across the finish line, we never thought that we would actually have to arrest a person running a drug treatment facility for using drugs on the inside. They were using it as a shoot-up location under the disguise of a company called Simply Recovery in Altamont Springs. So we arrested the director, and that is going on, and it's pretty prevalent there. Lastly is, well, two more points here, is we have a bill that's moving through Florida now, and I think other states should also follow this bill, that just because we revive somebody with the use of naloxone or Narcan, it should not protect the drug dealer from criminal prosecution. And what's happening is in Seminole County alone, we have 35 successful prosecutions for first-degree murder, more than any other county in the state of Florida, because we're working with our prosecutor. We're taking the risk and leading the way to make sure that the drug dealer is held accountable to the fullest extent of the law, because every other person that receives a hot dose of this poison is likely to experience similar fate. And to Amy's point, the language is important from a prosecution standpoint as well. When we say poisoning, it is this overt attempt, because what drug dealers now are doing, and some people say, well, are they trying to kill their clients? And no, the answer is, but if you were a recreational cocaine user and you use cocaine 4 times a month, you now find yourself calling for that drug dealer to give cocaine to you 4 times a day because you don't know it's being mixed with fentanyl, the highly addictive substance. So they've become what we refer to as dope sick. They're not looking and searching for euphoria any longer. They're looking just to make sure that they don't feel the deadly experience of detox that is an important part of it. Greater access to medical-based treatment therapy, whether it's buprenorphine, Vivitrol, whatever the doctor prescribes, combined with cognitive behavioral therapy, funding to support those programs and advocacies like that, prevention and awareness, and then for the prosecutors across the country that, quite frankly, shouldn't even be in their job. I mean, they just simply are not willing to look at cases. Heck, they don't prosecute some cop killers. For those bad prosecutors, the U.S. Attorney's Office has to be prepared to step in and take over those cases that are unwilling or unable to be prosecuted by these state attorneys across the country that are unwilling to accept that. If we can get all this recipe together, we can capitalize on the advocacies of these family members that have become incredibly vulnerable by telling their story. If there's one message of hope, is when we first started going down this path, when you were governor and Pam Bondi was the attorney general, families weren't showing up with photographs. There was not advocacy. There was this miscategorization that people were being lost because of cardiac arrest or asthma attacks. Now we have bold parents and family members that are walking up with the photographs, that are using their voice as advocacy, and we know that nobody is immune to the hazards and dangers associated with this.
Were those guys, the people that you caught, were they sentenced, that you prosecuted?
We just had one last week, 15-year sentence.
What do y'all think of social media sites? We had, at Homeland Security Committee, we had Facebook and other social media companies testify, and I asked Facebook, in 2013, DOJ shut down Silk Road, the illegal online marketplace on the dark web, which featured over 13,000 illegal drug postings. In comparison, according to the 2020 Facebook Transparency Report, Facebook found 5.9 million illegal drug sale postings on Facebook and Instagram. That's 453 times more drug postings than Silk Road. Said if you found 6 million, almost 6 million postings, how many million postings are you not finding? And why shouldn't you be shut down like Silk Road? So what do you guys think about the social media companies, and how much of an impact did that have on your?
Social media, as far as the 12 to 17-year-olds are concerned, it has everything to do with it. You know, this once scary thing that would happen in dark, scary places where kids wouldn't go is now brought into the light through apps like Snapchat. You know, it's in, that drug dealer is in their pocket 24/7. They will deliver to their house. And that has all been accelerated by these social media apps. And everything that social media comes out and says they're doing, you know, they love to come out and tell us, you know, make sure you're watching out for bullies and, you know, perverts on these apps. And so, you know, you look for those things as a parent, but they're not telling you, look for the eating disorder issues, look for the drugs, look for sextortion. They don't tell us those pieces, so we don't know to look for them. Because again, we're all kind of learning this new piece together. And then they come out and they give us, oh, we've got this new parent center. These are all little Band-Aids that are used for PR to make them look good, and they are doing the bare minimum to get by on these things. They will not do anything until they are held accountable. They will not create meaningful change until they are accountable.
I listened to a podcast this morning while I was getting ready to come here. There are dealers on these social media platforms that have menus. Do you need something for anxiety? Do you need something to help you sleep? Do you need something to help you study, etc.? These kids are coming to school and people are posting emojis of when they have pills, so they know who has the pills that day that they can go get them from. So it's making it so much easier for kids and young adults to get these pills. Because if they know what platforms to look at, they'll know how to get them.
Susie, what was your experience?
So I did a little research on this, you know, and back at the height of the opioid epidemic, when we had with Big Pharma and prescription pills, you had, you know, anywhere from 10 to 20 million people that were addicted to this. Through the magic of social media and the fact that every kid has a smartphone in their hand, and everybody has a smartphone in their hand, you know, you've increased that sales population to over 300 million. So when we are losing 100,000 a year to drug overdoses and poisonings, they don't care. They have 300 million more to sell to. And you don't have to go find them. They will find you through the use of those geo apps within the app.
What's been everybody's experience in whether if the schools bring people in and educate?
So that's my primary function, right? And I think that, you know, the messaging needs to change depending on the age. You know, in elementary schools, I talk about body autonomy. In middle school, I talk about kind of where it starts for them. And then, of course, in high school, it's, you know, full blown. But when talking to these teens and doing these listening sessions and working with teens through our peer-to-peer prevention program, one thing I've learned is that when the authorities show up, so it may be DEA is coming to do a presentation or the local sheriff is coming to do a presentation, those kids that are up to something, they already feel like they're in trouble. So they don't listen the same. It doesn't hit the same as it would coming from a bereaved parent. So personally, I think that there's a balance here in the state of Arizona. HIDA, DEA, the Army National Guard, and the community coalitions all work together on education and awareness. And that is impactful. You know, you've got this legal side coming out, you've got a parent talking about the reality of what's happening to a, you know, particular age group, and then you've got the Army National Guard that will come out and do the naloxone training. You know, all of those things together are creating a huge difference in the state of Arizona. In fact, Arizona is seeing a decrease in fentanyl deaths.
What's everybody else's experience at the schools?
So same thing, children, adolescents, teenagers, when you come in and you're a parent advocate and you've lost a child that looks like them or, you know, they can identify with, it's more like, oh my gosh, you know. But when they hear it from counselors, teachers, people that they talk to every day, it kind of goes over the head a little bit. But real stories, real impact, you know, seeing people like them that really have passed, that makes a big impact. And the other thing I found out when we were in high schools the other day, vaping is a big problem. Not that I want to derail this, but vaping can be a gateway drug to harder drugs. A lot of the teenagers today are vaping THC to deal with anxiety and stress, mental health, as you talked about. So that's got to be a little bit part of the conversation too.
You know, I think it's incredibly important to mention in this audience that, you know, although we have, you know, a lot of challenges, there is some hope on the horizon if we capitalize on this moment in time. So, you know, we have multiple different funding sources that I'm a little worried that absent a knowledgeable leadership at a local and state level, that the money will not be used properly. So we have, I think, 49 states that were in the lawsuit against Big Pharma. Settlement money is now being negotiated to the various states, but we also have multiple district lawsuits that are coming in, where most of the major metropolitan areas across the country went into an independent lawsuit against Big Pharma that is being settled for billions and billions of dollars. It is so important that this money is used for gold standard programs that absolutely work, not to replenish a fleet within a government organization or put up water treatment facilities, but to directly address the cause of this problem, the effects of this problem. So we have, you know, even the CARES Act, where counties and cities were getting hundreds of millions of dollars of this fund. Most of them didn't even know what to do with it. And if you look at the unintended consequences of COVID, we have this crisis that needs to be addressed like never before. We put together this public-private partnership, and I think it's important to mention this because the private sector is very interested in getting involved in helping out. We put in our county together, it's called the Hope and Healing Center, and it's run by the leadership at Advent Health Hospital. They take care of all of the clinical aspect of it, and even in a state that does not have extended Medicare, Medicaid, nobody is turned away. They walk through the doors regardless of their ability to pay. The generosity of companies like Walmart, other private interest groups, and Advent Health treats people, and it's important that no reference to the sheriff's office and no reference to county government beyond that building. And we've now just expanded that to the next phase that deals with the mental health receiving facility under the same criteria. There's this sexy narrative out there that if you put these co-response models that are out there, that it works. If you look at the people who are in need of mental health services, there'll never be enough beds available. And this is why we need assisted outpatient treatment in a less intrusive environment for the patient. So there is hope on the horizon. Every time we talk about this, the business leaders and people in the community, they're like, I'm convinced this affects me, it affects people in my workforce. Many people who are dependent on substances are actually going to work every day and they're formally being supervised by somebody. I think now is the time that we can leverage that awareness and do something great for this country.
Something like that nationwide would be a blessing to so many people out there to have each facet of the problem taken care of at a community level and have the communities involved.
One-stop shop.
Exactly.
And the hospitals are the ones that are interested in doing it.
Exactly.
You know, when I became governor, it was not just this issue, but what we found is for every juvenile, it was not just one issue.
It's
They had all these different issues. So the counties that did the best job, and a lot of it was actually run by, because of the sheriffs, the counties that did the best job, if a child had a problem, they threw everything out there. So that was, I mean, I was a business guy before, never thinking about it that way. You do that in business, but I mean, if you look at the counties that really did a good job in Florida when I was governor, that's what they did.
That's what you need to do here is just throw everything at it.
Right.
And what's so tough is, although we're trying to get a generation clean and sober and on the right path, we know that if we're not successful in this process, somebody who is the son or daughter of somebody who's dependent on substances or incarcerated is now most recently 13 times more likely to engage in maladaptive behavior themselves.
Yes.
Or generations of families end up going down this path because they were never provided the resources and help. And the deinstitutionalization across America was a big problem. A lot of people say, well, a lot of the homeless people are mentally ill. and I say true, but reverse the order. A lot of mentally ill people become homeless because there's no resources that are available, or they end up in local
Because there was a-
correctional facilities.
Because there was abuse back then.
Absolutely.
In all your different roles y'all have, Lisa, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to offer one thing, that we need to look at the social unit or the family unit as a whole.
Right.
Because there are so many families now that mom, dad, and the, older kids are involved in the drug trade or involved in substance abuse, and it becomes the norm. It's okay. This is what everybody does.
Whole family needs to be
Yeah, so education in schools and all of this, that you have options. And there's a really nice book out there. It's called Timba Talks. I don't know if anyone has seen, but it's a really awesome educational tool geared towards children whose family members have substance abuse problems. And it's not that they did anything wrong and that this is not the right way or this is not normal, and that there are options out there. So I think that's another way of looking at it before it becomes or grows to a problem that they are also involved in everything.
The other thing, Rebecca said this earlier, if you have a mental health issue, it's your problem, and you should can't you fix yourself?
Yeah.
Right? People just think, so in my case, we have a lot of alcoholism in my side, in our family, and people just think, well, just fix yourself.
Just stop.
Yeah. It just
not
doesn't
that
work that
easy.
way. I mean, you feel sorry for people to have the addictive minds, and you just thank God if you don't. But you don't know what you would do if you ever tried one, how it would impact you. And so,
Senator Scott, I'd like to suggest, again, going back to the commission's report, we did extensive research and analysis on almost all of the things we've heard about today. There are recommendations in the report from the commission on social media, both darknet and opennet. We performed research in the darknet and found things, obviously. We did research on the open web and found things which was surprising to us, the amount of things. And social media is on the open net. There are recommendations specifically to that issue. There are recommendations specifically on the education and messaging, focusing on the counterfeit tablets. And I'd just like to suggest that there are two major parts of this issue. One is the overdose that we're talking about, and the other is the poisoning. And I would suggest those are two sides of the same coin. These are both problems because we have people dying in this country who are actually overdosing, taking heroin, for example, or taking that's laced with fentanyl, or taking just fentanyl, and their intent is to take opiates or opioids. And then on the other side of that coin, there are folks that don't have a chance. They're caught up in this, and those are, I would suggest, are more like poisoning issues than overdose issues, because how could it be an overdose if they had no intent on taking an opiate or opioid? Extensive recommendations in the report supporting local law enforcement, because all of these deaths are local deaths, right? We compile them and hear about them and study them at the federal level, but where the rubber meets the road, these deaths are all at the local level. And the commission suggests extensive support to local law enforcement. The commission put out messaging on counterfeit tablets specifically, and I'll just end with a summary. I think every topic we heard about today, the commission has recommendations at all levels of government.
Sandy, did you want to add something?
I could talk about schools. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm going to do this as politely as I can. There is no appropriate dose of any illicit drug. They are all overdoses. The only thing that you can take a proper dose of is something that's just prescribed to you by a physician. Everything else is a poisoning. Everything else is a poisoning. I'm sorry. Okay, I feel better. So schools, yes, absolutely. Schools, the earlier the better. But did you have a question?
But you know what I see on the schools, so we had the Parkland school shooting, in Florida, so we passed historical legislation. I still don't see either this issue or the school safety issue, the school's actually thinking that they ought to be more active in it. I don't know, I mean, you see, I mean, I just don't get why if I was responsible for a school, right, I would think this was part of my job every day.
You would hope that, but the schools don't have a drug problem. Schools don't have a drug problem. So
To bring us in is to admit there might be a problem at
Yeah.
the school. and
So
that's-
schools, so. if
But
you
every
come-
school's got a drug problem.
No, they don't. Ask them. Ask them if they do.
I mean, it's just one kid.
The schools look at it as, we have dogs that come in and sniff every now and again, and we search backpacks every now and again, but we don't have a drug problem in our school. So if they turn their eye to keep thinking that they don't have a drug problem in their school, then they'll never.
So it took in
Educate their
California,
children.
it took in Los Angeles, California, and I was there when it happened. A 14-year-old girl died in a bathroom stall in Los Angeles, California. 3 days later, the governor of California mandated naloxone in every single school. So that's what it takes, a dead 14-year-old girl in a bathroom stall at a school. So if we have to wait for that as parents, we are waiting. We know it's happening.
Just a matter of
But
when.
we're waiting until enough children die in enough bathroom stalls that they open their doors to us. It's very difficult to get in.
So let me ask you a question. What can we do to get to get the schools?
Governor Newsom mandated naloxone in every single school. So if there's a federal mandate by the education department to mandate naloxone to be available in all schools, and a fentanyl education and awareness presentation, Fentanyl Fathers is prepared to do there's over 25,000 schools. There's over 250,000 parents ready to go. Ready to go.
If we get
Let
into
us
all the
in.
businesses, schools will be a part of that. But one of the challenges with the schools is these superintendents have little authority or exercise little authority over the independence of each particular school principal. So these school
up to the
principals are
principals.
calling their shots unless it's regulated.
They have the
to-
authority. They don't use their authority.
They don't use their.
Well, and it takes brave principals. The first principal I ever worked with, once the day was over, he was like, I was really nervous about this because I was really worried about what parents were going to say and what kind of pushback he was going to get. On the flip side of
What
that.
would the parents would be against it?
Well, they get worried about, well, if we have a documentary, if we show them this documentary, it's going to show them how to do it. No, your kids already know how to
The
do
same
it. They're
idea.
learning it from their friends.
If we provide condoms, they're going to have sex.
Yeah, exactly.
See, when I was a
The
kid, when for driver's ed, they shows that video of all those people
Mm-hmm.
dead, right?
Oh, they
There's
still
a
do the
crowd.
every 11 minutes before prom where they bring the car accident in and show
Right.
them the car
Well,
accident.
how's that any different?
Right? I'm with you. I'm totally with you. But it takes, there's kind of a process I go through. I'll meet with the principal, we'll have a nice chit chat, he'll introduce me to PTA, whatever the case may be, and then sometimes it'll be, well, we need to, we'll see if we can get you on the schedule in the fall. And so I'm like, okay, well, you're going into the deadliest summer yet, so that's on you. And then it's like, oh, we found a space for you on the schedule. LA County, I've been reaching out to them for at least a year, and the last conversation I had with them was like, what, do you want is it going to take someone to die at your school to do something? And lo and behold, there it happened, but they're still not really letting us in.
Even my son's school, it's a small charter school in Alaska. The superintendent of the schools will not allow naloxone, our presentation, our Dead on Amy's beautiful video that she's made for.
They won't allow it
Dead
in
on
the
Arrival.
school?
They will not allow it in school. I'm going to show it on March 22nd. Finally, I'm going to get my son's own school, March 22nd, has agreed to show the film, allow me to talk about Bruce, and present naloxone education and training, hopefully distribution. Students need to have naloxone available to them without asking. They need to have it without asking a parent, because then they have to have the whole conversation about drugs with an adult. They just need to have the Facing Fentanyl kit hanging on the wall. They need to be able to get it and save their lives and save their friends' lives.
Have any of y'all, have you guys gotten together and said that this is what a school should do?
Yeah, I have a presentation ready to go. I can do it right now.
I've,
Yeah, get the laptop out, we're ready to go.
I've researched presentations to give at
But
schools.
is there a best practices that you guys have been able to come?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Can you
we're
get-
ready to
If you
go.
can get that to me.
Yes, sir.
I've actually contacted my daughter's school several times and left messages and emails to the principal to try to get in there to talk to the kids.
It's a process, though.
Yeah.
So
It
it's,
is.
it's taken that first school to let you in. So in my son's school district in Capo Unified in Orange County, California, I am their go-to nowadays. But it was a process. I had to keep going and keep talking and then, I eventually met the superintendent and she was like, okay, give her whatever she wants. Now we're working on the long-term planning sessions of, okay, here's what it's going to look like in 3 months, what each quarter will look like, what will happen at the beginning of the school year. But it took, 2 years to get to that point.
How many,
So
right, that's 300 dead kids a day.
Yeah.
For 2 years.
So after the Parkland school shooting, all the parents, did different things. One, Max Shatner, he lost his son. But what he tried to do is put together a database of best practices. Because, if you look at what's happened around the country, in Florida, as an example, we rate schools based on academics, right? And so what's happened is you want to move to the school districts, like you're in a good school district, so property values go up because people want to live there. You would think that would be the same thing with school shootings, it'd be the same thing with the fentanyl. And fentanyl, if you look at the numbers, it's a way bigger number than school shootings.
Correct.
So has anybody put together because it seems like it wouldn't be that hard in the private sector to do this. So this is our list of things you should do. Maybe you guys have done it. This is a list of things you should do, and then we can rank however many schools there are in the country and say they're doing it, this one's not. Because I can tell you what, I have grandkids. I bug my poor daughters on this stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, what has your school done?
So MAD's done it. MAD is a template. MAD is doing it and continues to
On the
do it.
fentanyl?
No, they're doing it with drunk driving. So it's
Yeah.
been done. So we know we can get into schools because MAD got into schools. All we have to do is
So Matt's
approach
got a
it.
program?
It's not about fentanyl. I'm just saying,
I know, but
we're
they've
talking
got a
about
program
getting
for
into
drunk driving?
over 25,000 schools in the
NOPE
country.
has a program in it.
DEA has a program. The,
But but it
so,
doesn't
but
impact.
they're not talking about fentanyl. So we're saying.
Nobody's had, okay.
Fentanyl Fathers is saying, it's been done. So we just need to change the narrative from the MAD narrative to the fentanyl and just say, we're already in schools. MAD's already in schools. DARE from DEA is already in schools. We just need to change the narrative. MAD's was very effective in what they did.
Right.
In every school in the country and continues to do at every
Yeah,
school in the country.
look at the numbers. It's 10,000 people dying of alcohol-related deaths.
Right.
Versus,
And versus-
70,000.
And their budget, what MAD's budget is millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Right.
And what's fentanyl's budget to get into schools?
Right.
So the one point I want to bring out, and we're kind of dusting around it, but the main correlation here is the resistance from the schools to allow education and solid programs drives the kids to social media and the internet for their educations. And they go on Reddit and they're taught how to do drugs and what dosages and what to mix it with and what's better and what's not. And they teach them how to cloak it, how to buy it, how to get their hands on everything without their parents knowing, it's a whole nother set of education through social media because they're not getting accuracy from within the school systems.
Right.
I think it's also important because, we have the fentanyl and the poisonings, but as a country, we have to stop legalizing and allowing people greater access to like cannabis and all of these substances. Just pulling into the parking lot, I'm with my chief of staff, and it's just the smell of marijuana everywhere, which 31 years ago would have resulted in a SWAT team doing a search of every vehicle in that parking lot. But now with the presence of industrial hemp, which tests just like actual marijuana, prosecutors across the country are like, look, I can't do anything with the cases. We don't know if it's industrial hemp, if it's cannabis. and the inhibitions are lowered with our kids. You know, some of these substances are still gateways to larger substances. We have
And-
this whole recipe.
And fentanyl's atomized on marijuana, so we got lots and lots of parents,
Say that again?
dead children, that
Yeah.
marijuana is being atomized with fentanyl.
Yeah.
So there's nothing that's safe if it didn't come from somebody in a white coat.
And you're also
Nothing.
seeing the statistics on increases in overdoses and deaths dealing with fentanyl and methamphetamine and such are along the lines or the pathways of the states that are decriminalizing drugs and making it more more acceptable and easier. You're seeing the youth population increasing in their usage. You're seeing overdose rates increasing, not in hundreds, but thousands of percent.
Oregon's a horrible example of
So,
that.
yes.
So I know a mother in Oregon that her son was approached by a police officer in Oregon. He had less than 20 pills on him, which is anything over 20 pills is considered illegal in Oregon. He had 15 pills.
Yep.
They let him go. He was dead the next morning. He had been with the police the night before he died, but the laws in Oregon, they let him go.
Yeah.
And just a couple of years ago, we were in the conversation about permanently scheduling fentanyl. And you know, some leaders up here in Washington wanted to do away with minimum mandatories as a part of doing it, which would have thrusted people into the fentanyl business if there was no minimum mandatories. It was just absolutely absurd to think about that.
So what experience with social media, have you guys talked to people at like at Facebook or Instagram or?
Oh, why, yes, I have. So spring of 2021, we had a meeting with Snapchat executives. And long story short, to summarize, it was like, we're so sorry for your loss. We had no idea this was such a problem. So bold-faced lie to start with. But, you know, we can see this showing up in the news in 2017, Snapchat's being warned, hey, this is happening on your platform. And if you don't get a handle on it, it's going to get out of control. And here we are in that out of control phase. And
Done nothing.
They've absolutely done nothing. Nothing impactful. They put out little things like, you know, they started this parent center. Okay, great. So now as a parent, I have to get a Snapchat account. I connect with my kid. I can see who their kid's talking to, but I can't see what they're talking about. And they equate that to, well, you don't go in their bedroom and listen to the conversations. Maybe, maybe not, but the option's there, number one. And number two, that kid, that friend comes into my home, I can vet that kid. I can have a conversation with that kid. I can go out to the car and meet their parents when they're dropped off. You know, and then once they go in that bedroom, they still have Snapchat. It doesn't change that. It's just a nice little move to make it look like they're really doing something when the reality is it's still a huge issue. It's a little Band-Aid on a gaping wound, and that is what really needs to be addressed. And at this point, you know, I'd love to see a duty of care. To get, you know, we want these companies, that brick and mortar companies are held to a certain standard when crime happens in their stores. Same thing needs to happen on these platforms. And then oversight. I think oversight with some kind of accountability is what's going to lead to that meaningful change.
Senator, I think there's three key things that could be done here. And we learned this in the commission that Amy had me serve on. You know, the tech platforms insist that they're doing proactive referrals to law enforcement when they find criminal behavior, and yet not a single tech platform has shown or crowed about a case that has been brought based upon a proactive referral, which is why I think maybe it hasn't actually ever happened, right? So they talk about how compliant they are with warrants, but over and over again, I talk to law enforcement who talk about how incredibly...
There's nobody to talk to. How do you even get that hold of anybody?
That's also a problem. But, you know, how they talk about how fast they are. But then you talk to law enforcement, they're like, yeah, like it's a black hole when I deliver an information request. You know, it's not because it's full of typos. Like they have a recalcitrance to actually comply with it that you don't see with financial institutions or anyone else. And they talk about how much they take down. They take down all this content, but then over and over again, it's very easy to find this content online. They need some transparency. Right? Let's just start. Let's not even.
That's why I did the bill I did.
Exactly, and I like that bill, and I'm looking forward to helping you with that bill this year. But they need transparency. They need to actually be audited to see if when they tell us that they did 6 million takedowns of content, did they actually do 6 million? When they say they referred 150 cases to the DEA, did that actually happen, or is that just a press release?
Have anybody referred to you?
It's, Senator, the problem that we have is, we have a good relationship with the local people from a lot of these tech companies when we do get warrants and all that, but it's a game of whack-a-mole. They're into these online gaming platforms. As soon as you put a stop to one, they open up a new chat. It's Discord, it's this, where there's people actively going on these, the games that kids play, and they'll start doing in there an instant message inside that venue. And there's so many platforms, and like when we talk about Facebook and TikTok, these kids are like, we're not on Facebook or TikTok anymore. We're on like 5 different things that you'd never even heard of before. So when the parents go and look at the phone and say, well, you don't have Facebook, you don't have Twitter, you don't have TikTok, the things that we do, they've got all of these gaming apps and these different ways to communicate. And the last thing that has really thrusted us into this process is, once upon a time, if you were going to use drugs, it was like a risky thing. Like you had to, 1, get transportation. 2, you had to go into a neighborhood that was
A bad neighborhood.
And 3, you had to potentially risk the hazard of having a gun shoved in your face and getting robbed. Now it's just like, well, I don't even have to do that. I can just have it dropped off at a location where I'm not even at. It is a recipe for
Like
disaster.
pizza.
Yeah.
Like a pizza.
In the middle of the night, mom and dad are asleep.
Yeah.
These kids are dying, and it was supposed to be the safest place, in their bedrooms.
Yeah.
So we've talked about social media and stuff. Another, ahead of social media, and you mentioned it a little bit about packages, and UPS, FedEx, the United States Postal Service, in our opinion, is culpable in the deaths of fentanyl by not allowing law enforcement to slow down their production enough to, you guys, he's nodding his head. You know what they're doing.
It is a mess. So with Postal, we were talking about it a little bit. So what has happened with Postal, if you look at Postal in San Francisco, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack, but you don't know what a needle or a haystack looks like. All the packages are up on conveyor belts. Any effort to interdict a U.S. postal package now will result in an immediate notification that your package is delayed. Soon as if you pull it off for 1 second and have a dog walk it, the person who's taking delivery on the other end gets a notice that your package is being delayed for whatever reason. They just don't accept it. As soon as it gets delayed like that, we're like, and if you look at it, they'll have like an operation like that with just like a handful of people working as postal inspectors, very little interdiction. And this is what we saw from China in the early stages of this. We knew that rogue chemists in China were manufacturing and sending them either directly from China or to other countries that are more friendly with us. Many would make the argument, even with the cartels, military actions is probably warranted against these 2 major cartels in Mexico. I mean, these are killing people in this country like nobody's business.
So we're, in the fentanyl world, we're not kidding around about that. We're saying cartels need to be declared terrorist organizations immediately. We're saying fentanyl is a weapon of mass destruction immediately, so that we can go to those countries and treat them as terrorists and chemical companies in China that are distributing weapons of mass destruction. We used to whisper about that in dark corners.
Yeah, I agree.
We are no longer whispering about that. They had a Homeland Security meeting about it today.
So, Brandon, you're usually not quiet.
Look, this has been fantastic.
So, what do you? So
I've
what
never
do
seen
you?
it from this perspective, ever. I'm always looking at it from the supply end. When you look at it, what's coming in, how's it coming in, why is it coming in? I've never looked at it from a mental health position. I've never looked at it from, the schools and all of that. What I do know is that crime is all about risk reward. That's what it's about. And when we legalized marijuana, when a lot of states legalized marijuana, what it did was it pushed the cartels to go and decide how were they going to make their profits. The cartels recognized that even though it was a lot harder to bring in these large bundles of marijuana than what it was small packages of cocaine, the risk was so much less than what it was to trafficking cocaine. And now you're looking at the fentanyl, and the risk is so little now because you can bring in such large quantities in such concealable packages, whereas marijuana you couldn't do. And so when we look at the supply end of it, if we shut down, I know that when I was growing up, part of growing up was making mistakes.
And
Not fatal ones.
no, kids are going.
Yeah, you can make a mistake, but you didn't die.
Children are going to make mistakes. That's
Right.
part of growing up. And that's
Right.
the thing is if we cut down on the supply, maybe we can save more lives.
Okay, so I know we're out of time. Here's what I'd ask, is that if you would, just give me your ideas, because I'll try anything to stop this. I mean, I think we all, internalize this, because it could impact, it impacted some, you guys, right? So, but we internalize it. I mean, I don't want this to happen, right? To somebody I love, and just like you don't want it to happen to somebody else that you love or anybody else that is loved. And so if you give me our ideas, I will work on them. I mean, this is a significant issue. I agree with you on the marijuana. I mean, it frustrates me that people think that, it's all okay. No, it's a gateway drug. So, it's because we all know somebody that's impacted, whether it's fentanyl or something else, or whether it's alcohol or something else that's been impacted by this. And so we've got to figure this out. So they're just killing our kids. So, but thanks everybody for being here.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Senator.